Okay, now we are ready to take a look at our learning targets. Again, we want to begin with the end in mind. So what do we want students to learn? So I've established this course. I have filled in the required fields here at the top. I have filled in the course authors down here at the bottom. Feel free to fill in any of these fields as well. It would be wonderful if you can. Not a requirement for phase 1, however. So we've done those steps. Now we're going to create our learning targets for this course. These will be derived from the state standards. So I'm going to go over here to the top and I'm going to click on Learning Targets. I have three options here. You can see I currently don't have any learning targets listed for this course. I have three options here for creating my learning targets. I can just simply create my own learning target, which might be something that you want to do. Maybe you feel like you need to create some specific learning targets of things that students need to know in order for you to teach the standards. We know that that always ends up being the case. Maybe they need to know how to read a protractor before you can do the activity that you're doing with them. So you might need to create your own learning target just from scratch. But in most cases, we're going to be deriving our learning targets from the standards. Now we have these two different options and they're very similar. New learning target by district standard and new learning target from district standard. So I want to explain the difference between those two. This bottom one where it says new learning target from district standard means that the standard itself is specific enough that it can be a learning target. Maybe it's just one thing that the students need to learn. It may not be phrased like we normally phrase a learning target. You know, we're used to seeing them written as students will, and we know our standards are not written exactly like that. But if the standard itself can be turned directly into a learning target without breaking it apart, then we could do that. If we need to take a standard and break it down into smaller steps that we may incorporate into multiple different lessons, then we would choose this option, new learning target by district standard. So I'm going to show you each of those. Let's start with if we're just copying over a standard and making it a learning target. You will know that you've arrived in the right place because it'll have this little statement right up here where it says this page should be used if you want to create your learning targets as an exact copy of a district standard. Okay, so what we can do here is we can filter these down. So right now it's showing you every standard that you have access to. But if I click on here, I can narrow it down to just the Indiana standards, just the Common Core standards if I want. So let's say that I want to turn pretty much every Indiana academic standard into a learning target. So I'm going to narrow it down to just the Indiana standards, and then I can click Select All. Now before I actually save those all as learning targets, I might want to go down and look through, because this particular learning target right here at the top has an awful lot of parts to it, and I'm probably going to need to break that down into individual learning targets, because this is an awful lot to consider to be one learning target. So I might uncheck that one, and I'd probably want to make a note of it because I'm going to need to go back and create some learning targets to address this standard. I can look through here. Some of these are very specific. It'll work just fine as a learning target. I don't need to break it down anymore. Here's another one. Lots of different parts. I'm probably going to want to break that down into individuals. So I want to go through my list, uncheck the ones that can't just be transferred over. This might be another one. Make a list of those particular ones so that we don't neglect to go back and make learning targets from them. Once we have the ones checked off that we want to create learning targets from, we can simply click Save. Now you can see that I have these listed. I can change it. It's alphabetically listed right now, but I can change it to list them by standard. So here's the standard, here's the learning target. We made an exact copy of it from there. Now let's go back to those ones that we need to break down. We're going to choose this option now. We're going to start with a standard, but we're going to write our own learning targets from it. So I'm going to click Create New Learning Standard. Or learning target by standard. So now I can choose right here. I'm going to select that first one that I skipped over before. I'm going to select it, and it's going to place the standard up here and give me a place to write my learning target from it. So I can shortcut a little bit here. I can copy and paste a piece of this if I want. And I can, students, I can't type, students will identify and understand idioms. And maybe I can put my little definition in there if I want to make sure. So I've kind of simplified that down into one specific thing, and I can check if I want it to be introduced, reinforced, and mastered. And by the way, we can mark these things on the learning targets that we copied directly from standards as well. We just have to go in and edit that, and that's something that we may choose to save until phase 3. I can, make an extended description of this. I can select how I want to assess it. Again, these are all things that we are going to do at some point in time. Then I'm going to click Save Learning Target, and it tells me that it's been added. If I want to come over here, I can see which learning targets I have. But let's say I need to add another one now because I haven't captured all the parts of this standard as learning targets. So now I'm going to copy another piece of this, and you can just retype this if that's easier for you. Students will identify and understand, and I'm going to make this one about analogies. And then I've got my description of analogies there. And again, I could fill in any of these other things. I could talk about how I'm going to assess it, but I'm going to now save the learning target. So now you can see that we have 2, and we can continue to work our way through this, metaphors, similes, and break that down into multiple different learning targets until we have accomplished all of those. And when I click Done and Back, you can see that here's my original standard. Here are the learning targets that I've broken down from that standard. So those are the ways that you're going to establish all of your learning targets. It will take a little bit of time to go through all those standards. It depends a little bit on how big your standards are and how much they have to be broken down. Hopefully your standards are already very specific and you don't have to do a whole lot of that. Don't forget that you may need to include some Common Core, so we may need to go back here and select Common Core standards, and then again select all and choose which ones uncheck some of them that we may need to break down a little bit more. Same process for both Common Core and English Language Arts, whichever state standards, whichever ones need to be included at this point in time.